listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I am your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And you know, it's the last day of the month today, so I always like to clean some things up on the last day before we head into a totally new month. And there's some things that I want to discuss in this video that I think you'll find profound. And it's really designed to get you to think outside of the box of all the events that were happening around this crime in 2022 and how the events surrounding this crime seem to work its way into it in many different ways. Ways that a lot of people just don't want to acknowledge, but they're right there in black and white, right in front of your face. So in this video, I'm going to point out some things that will show you what was going on around the events, what specifically translated to the events, and what we can glean from that. Then I'm going to give you some determinations of the investigation that I've completed into this case. There's still a lot left. There's still a lot left until I get the final pieces of the puzzle, and that includes the unsealed court docs, because we never know what they've taken out of these reports to hide from us. Until I see, for example, the 1112 camera. I'd like to see that camera around the early morning hours as it begins to turn daylight, because I believe that if you've watched those like I have, you see a white car that very much resembles a police car a few hours after the crime roll through 1330 Linda Lane, and it does some interesting maneuvering, like pulling through, stopping, doing a three-point turn, and heading back towards the King Road residence. I firmly believe that's a law enforcement officer heading to the King Road residence that's going to institute that cover-up. And I need to see that video for myself. I need to see the video that's missing from Linda Lane from 330 to 406. We know that some of that video exists because in the past, I'll give you an example, like Get a Clue, he had that video of Linda Lane from 355 to 406. So if that exists, then I have to believe that from 330 to 355 exists as well. We all should have recorded that when he put it out, but he put it out and he pulled it back pretty quick after that. So I need to see that. I need to see the video of Paradise Drive from 4 to 405. I need to see the video of all the WSU cameras. There's a lot of things left that we need to see. I want to see all the police reports. So once they finally release all that, we can make our final determinations of this case, and we really can't until that happens. But I can tell you this, over the last, I don't know how long, I've been going through and I've been creating what I call receipt sheets as it relates to all of the physical evidence that they pulled from the King Road residence. And I finally got it complete. I've been going over it with my members, and I've created sheets that are very accurate, that shows the dates that they did the pre-test, the post-test, the results. I've created maps of where all this evidence is. And it shows you a picture, I assure you, that you would not see in your mind until you see the final synopsis of all those forensic reports. And let me say this, I will be bringing that to you soon. And I noticed in a comment in a video yesterday that one of my subscribers was saying, please, Pav, are you going to show those member videos because I'm having financial difficulties right now and I can't afford to be a member? Well, let me say this. Yes, eventually I will release the member information that I've covered with them to you. And if you cannot, I appreciate everybody that's a member. It helps me tremendously. But if you cannot afford to be a member, please do not join the membership. That is not there to take people that are having financial troubles and try to get your money out of them. I don't like that. And so just, yes, I will be bringing that information to you. Please do not join to get that information. Do not put yourself in a financial bind to help POV, please. So with all that being said, though, I want to cover some information first about the finer points of the investigation and the agencies that were involved in this investigation, because we now know that the lead agency supposedly was Moscow PD, working closely with the FBI. Then you had the ISP that I've said is pretty much running down leads that they give them and then reporting back. And they're just kind of lead runners. Now their forensic department actually is doing all the forensic tests on the evidence for the case, except for that secret DNA they sent the vial to Othram. But then you also have Homeland Security involved in the investigation. And we can understand the FBI getting involved. If y'all followed me for a long time, we went over, everybody thought that, just because it crossed the state line that made this a federal case. And we went all through that and figured out that the only way that a case like this becomes a federal case if you cross state lines is if you cross state lines during the process of committing these types of crimes, which means you would have had to carry a body across the state lines for it to be a federal case. But because it was 3 or more that was unalived at one time, it enacts a federal act. And that act does not get the FBI access to the investigation into the case. All that act does is allow the FBI to assist in the investigation. But we can clearly understand why the FBI would assist in that investigation, and they really did assist in that investigation in big ways with their secret federal grand jury that produced all those subpoenas that got all that evidence that nobody's ever heard or seen, including the defense. But Homeland Security and their task force officers brings up a whole different ball game, because we see now that they were involved in this investigation. And that really should pique your curiosity. Let me show you some things about that I think you'll find interesting. And then I go back to this article that one of my subscribers has pointed me to from the Idaho Capital Sun. And it talks about Governor Little and him unveiling Operation Esto Perpetua, the initiative to fight the F word. And this was back on March 3rd, 2022. And he wanted $250,000 from a general fund to create law enforcement panels and citizens groups. And he noted Idaho's growing drug threat. METH and F are the most serious and growing drug threats in Idaho. He talks about F. More than half of the F investigations this year involved direct ties to sources in Mexico. 23 of 24 trafficking operation investigated in 2020 identified Mexico as a source country for the narcotics. Primarily, the METH is transported into Idaho and Oregon from Mexico through California. So he was really looking to put a dent in the drug gang. And he instituted Operation Esto Perpetua, an initiative that he said will connect law enforcement, policymakers, and families to fight the F and other drugs in the state. He unveiled the initiative during a press conference Thursday at the Idaho State Capitol after originally previewing it during January's State of the State address. Esto Perpetua is the state motto, and it means let it be perpetual, or may it endure forever in Latin. This initiative creates a new law enforcement panel, new citizens action group, which Little said will conduct public meetings around Idaho over the next 2 months with the goal of reducing the flow of F and METH into Idaho. We need to hear from Idahoans about the impact of F and METH in the lives of their loved ones, Little said. Little and Colonel Kendrick Willis, director of the Idaho State Police, said in one instance last week, Idaho State Police in Coeur d'Alene seized 100,000 F pills in a traffic stop. 1/4 of those pills, or 25,000 pills, could contain a lethal dose of the drug, Little said. This is why there is urgency we have, Little told reporters Thursday. Willis, Canyon County Sheriff Kieran Donahue, Boise Police Department, Mike Maraglia, Senator Abby Lee, a Republican from Fruitland, a representative from Fruitland, former prosecutor and legislature Luke Malik joined Little at Thursday's announcement, will participate in a new action group or citizens panel. The $250,000 would be one-time funding that would come from the general fund to the state budget, Little and his aides say. Coeur d'Alene, 100,000 pills in a traffic stop back in March of 2022. Isn't that interesting? Operation Esto Perpetua was going on during this time. So you know me, I start with something simple. Like, for instance, this ISP report dated November 21st, 2022. And what they were doing was on November 18th, they were interviewing friends of the victims. And I couldn't help but see that this particular interview was done with one of the victims' friends and her boyfriend at their home in Canyon County, Idaho. But the people conducting the interview was Idaho State Police Detective Matt Wernsing and Homeland Security Investigations Task Force Officer Sage Collins. And just so you know, I'm not messing that up, Homeland Security Investigations Task Force Officer Sage Collins and I, Matt Wernsing, interviewed them. So I said, you know what, who is Idaho or Homeland Security Investigations Task Force Officer Sage Collins? Do we have any information on him? And then when I look him up, I've been up and down, and there's no publicly available information or record of an individual named Sage Collins serving as a Homeland Security Task Force officer. And in searches of law enforcement announcements, news reports, government databases for a person with this name in an official capacity within federal or state level Homeland Security Task Force in Idaho yielded no relevant results. And Homeland Security Task Forces often comprise federal, state, and local law enforcement partners, but personnel information for specific officers on these task forces is generally not made public unless related to a specific public case or official announcement. And I went on to have it look further, and it says searching for a person named Sage Collins that was involved with Homeland Security, and it doesn't return any mention of this name. In other law enforcement actions, federal, state, and local enforcement agencies, including those under the Department of Homeland Security, did carry out task force operations in Idaho in 2022. However, none of the publicly reported actions mention an officer named Sage Collins. For instance, some of the actions they did take was in May. A Boise man was sentenced for transporting women for illicit activities. A Pocatello man was found guilty of conspiracy to distribute controlled substances. A Boise man was sentenced for possessing meth and H. And then I continued on, and there's no mention of an officer named Sage Collins. And then it goes on to talk about, who all was involved in the Moscow investigation. And I can't find anything on this Sage Collins working for Homeland Security, but obviously he's involved in the investigation, says he's a task force officer. So I looked further into the Homeland Security Task Force operations, and I see that Trump has actually instituted a new program based off of some of the work the task force had done in the past, and they're kind of making it a unified thing now. And I think it lets us in on some insight.
Transnational organized crime, or TOC groups, foreign gangs, and violent cartels have successfully exported their brands of violent criminal activity to America. For decades, the FBI has leveraged its unique law enforcement authorities, capabilities, and expertise to combat TOC activity and disrupt and dismantle these groups' illicit activities. But as talk threats evolve and endanger our communities in a variety of ways, including flooding our streets with fentanyl and engaging in human trafficking, the U.S. government is stepping up its offensive against these groups. In response to a January 2025 presidential executive order aimed at addressing this threat, the FBI and our partners at Homeland Security Investigations are announcing the implementation of Homeland Security Task Forces. On this episode of our podcast, we'll explain how and why these new interagency task forces came to be. We'll also define their unique tasking and explain why their work is vital to crushing violent crime and protecting the homeland from the threat of terrorism. This episode of our show is part of Your FBI, Crushing Violent Crime, a campaign highlighting the people, partners, and mission of Your FBI and our ongoing work to dismantle violent crime and keep our communities safe. This is Inside the FBI. Inside the FBI recently spoke with Section Chief Mark Remley, who leads the Bureau's Transnational Organized Crime Program, for an in-depth take on these Homeland Security task forces. Remley, who's been leading the FBI's implementation of the new task forces, explained that the model
was originated based on Executive Order 14159.
President Donald Trump signed this executive order in January, mandating the U.S. Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security to take the steps needed to form Homeland Security task forces in all 50 states. According to the executive order, these task forces are intended to end the presence of criminal cartels, foreign gangs, and transnational criminal organizations throughout the United States, dismantle cross-border human smuggling and trafficking networks, end the scourge of human smuggling and trafficking, with a particular focus on such offenses involving children, and ensure the use of all available law enforcement tools to faithfully execute the immigration laws of the United States. These task forces, which reached full implementation in September, are
intended to be a long-term, sustainable task force focused on bringing all federal, state, and local partners together under one roof to have a more coordinated and integrated approach as we combat these threats. Ultimately, it's focused on targeting and combating transnational organized crime, focusing on cartels, transnational gangs,
and threats of that nature impacting the United States from around the globe and here within the United States. HSTFs will investigate transnational criminal activity, including, but not limited to, drug trafficking, money laundering, human trafficking, alien smuggling, homicide, extortion, kidnapping, and weapons trafficking. They'll also investigate other TCO-related violations where there is or may be a federal investigative interest. And while immigration enforcement isn't a focal point for the Homeland Security task forces, Remley said the teams will use it as a tool in the course of their investigations. As Remley explains,
in the course of an investigation, we will analyze and look at it strategically in terms of if there are people here committing illegal acts and violent acts that don't have status. We will look at whether it's more appropriate for the use of government resources to remove them from the country, or if it makes more of a strategic impact to pursue investigations and prosecution of those individuals. One of the key aspects that the task force will focus on is targeting those newly designated foreign terrorist organizations, primarily those drug cartels and those transnational gangs. But there are a number of different transnational criminal organizations that are not designated as foreign terrorist organizations that will continue to be worked under the Homeland Security Task Force. And so it'll depend on a case-by-case basis how that investigation organically develops and what kind of information is available to drive that investigation.
The ultimate goal, he said, is to ensure the FBI's finite resources are focused on pursuing the worst of the worst transnational criminal organizations in the U.S. and internationally, whose illegal activities impact Americans here at home. But the task forces aren't just focused on response. They're also prioritizing prevention. Homeland Security task forces will use intelligence, data analysis, and strategic partnerships to stop threats before more lives are put at risk.
The FBI and our partners at DHS have been designated to co-lead the creation of the task force. So our teams came together in March and began working on building what the task force model was going to look like.
The model is intended to take a whole-of-government approach to the talk threat, with ground-level task forces including a mix of local, state, and federal partners.
Most federal law enforcement agencies are mandated to participate, but there are still other agencies federally that have expressed an interest in supporting it, and we rely on our state and local partners heavily.
On a day-to-day basis, Remily said the task forces will be tasked based on leads
from the National Coordination Center and through the National Counterterrorism Center as they're analyzing all the intelligence and doing their network analysis of the threats that exist in large part outside the country. So those leads will be sent to the respective core regions for action as deemed appropriate. And then investigations will be conducted as they normally have, organically through different sources, to different information that's reported to state, local, and federal law enforcement.
And from there, that lead agency can collaborate with HSTF partner agencies to pursue that investigation.
We will leverage their different skill sets, as well as the Bureau's, which focuses on the enterprise theory of investigation, looking at the entire organization and disrupting it, regardless, not just focusing on drug trafficking, but looking at the money laundering aspect, the illicit finance, whatever criminal activity the organization is involved in. We will look at it holistically and target whatever is appropriate. Every state has to have at least one Homeland Security task force, which is co-located and commingled with the federal, state, and local partners. So what we decided to do was use a regional model.
This model employs regional hubs, known as Central Operations and Regional Enforcement, or CORE offices, and a series of satellite offices to support the ground-level task forces. Like the task forces, these offices are co-led by the FBI and HSI. The HSTF model also includes a national-level National Coordination Center, or NCC, to provide high-level support to task forces. The FBI and HSI similarly co-lead the NCC. Personnel from over 15 federal agencies, including U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the Drug Enforcement Administration, the U.S. Secret Service, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the United States Marshals Service, Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation, the National Counterterrorism Center, the Department of War, and the U.S. Postal Inspection Service also staff this center.
The usual suspects. What I want to do is give you where I'm at on this case. And most people know that I stay as far away from all of the psychic stuff as I can possibly stay, because the Bible says do not talk to familiar spirits, and I follow that. And I believe most of it is mumbo jumbo, but the reason I do stay away is because, for one, it scares me, because my personal beliefs are those aren't familial spirits that are nice. Those are evil spirits pretending to be nice. That's just my personal belief. But let me give you an example of something that shows you why I stay away from that, because it freaks me out. And I'll give you that here in a minute. But first, let me give you where I'm at on who actually committed this crime. I have 3 people in mind, and here are the percentages where I'm at on the culpability of them being, or the probability of them being the assailant. I am 99.8% sure that Mr. Mowich is one of the assailants in this case. I'm at 92%, which is a very high percentage that this is the female involved. And I'm at 94.7%, which is pretty dang high, that Mr. Kopaka was involved. You don't see Koberger anywhere in here because this is the white car right here, y'all. Now, of course, there's going to be co-conspirators. And when I say co-conspirators, I don't mean the people that called the shots on this. That's a whole nother group. I mean co-conspirators that were either watching the victims or lookouts or actually involved in setting this thing up. And you can see my percentages here. This one I'm fairly certain. This one I'm really certain. This one's getting pretty high, and this one's getting pretty high. And these may shock you. Well, we all know this one is very high on the list. This one has always been high on my list, and I believe this is the driver of the vehicle that pulls out at 353. Now, I believe there were 2 people that were in charge of reporting back on locations of victims. And the victims in this case would be the targets, and there is no doubt two targets in this case. Xana and Maddie. That's your two targets. That's what it's always been. Now, again, I stay as far away from the psychic stuff as anybody could possibly be. And I almost want to close my ears when I hear things. But, I heard things years ago that really scared me in this case, and it's never left my mind. And that's when somebody really does start talking to those familial spirits. Now, we've got Mr. Mowich here, which y'all know I have talked about a lot, gone through the history. He grew up in the area of Washington near the Bay, creating havoc. He spent time in prison in the Tacoma and Seattle area. And he lived in Lewiston, spent time in prison in Boise. Now, when I hear this guy say this,
I almost feel they could have been followed by a car home, but they didn't act till later. I think it was covered with a hat or ski mask. It's chilly. It feels cool out at night. I think with a hat, I'm getting work boots on at least one. I don't think they were employees at the school, or I feel also escape, although like escape out of the area. I'm getting a feeling that there was a witness. I'm getting something about a gymnasium at the school. And believe me, sometimes in these cases, I don't just draw to one fact. I'm giving kind of a list because they don't have much to go on right now. So anything that I come upon that seems a little suspicious, a gymnasium or something there, I would see who's on parole and who was on parole from this year in that area. And I'm also on to, where's Tacoma? Is that Washington? I'm getting Tacoma. Hold on, I'm going Boise though. Boise, Idaho. Oh, check release records for inmates in those places. If I'm narrowing down police records of escapees, Tacoma, Boise, two places I'm getting, any prison system near there, I would say a release date. Actually, I was getting a J, so either January or July. I would say a release date. Actually, I was getting a J, so either January or July.
when I say we're getting down to the nitty gritty, I say we're getting down to the nitty gritty, and it takes years of picking fly shit out of black pepper to get down to the nitty gritty. Making up a new conspiracy and theory every week based off of old news reports and just your critical thinking just isn't enough. You got to dive in, look at the evidence, follow the trail, because there is a trail, I assure you. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, your thoughts, your criticisms, and until next time, Pavarotti is out.